Hello. Welcome to this audio presentation of The Ghost Diary, a serial novella by Jim Stevens. The Ghost Diary will be published in a serial audio format. A new chapter will be released weekly, so be sure to hit the follow and notification buttons so you never miss an episode. Now enjoy the first episode of The Ghost Diary. Episode 1, A Lonely Voice. The rain hit the windows in sheets, obscuring the view of the parking lot from the second-floor waiting room, the patchwork sky of gray releasing its tears across the entire city. The hum of the building's air unit thrummed softly, accompanied by the muted voices of the receptionists secluded behind the frosted glass of their office. Ellie sat looking at the magazine she had plucked from the table, neither reading nor comprehending its contents, simply staring at the lines and spaces of the article she had pretended to read. The door beside the check-in desk opened. "Miss Finley," the nurse called her name in whispered tones, despite Ellie being the only patient in the room. Ellie smiled in acknowledgement and rose to head for the door. She had made it halfway across the room before remembering the magazine in her hand and let it fall into an empty chair, abandoning it there. "We just need to get your weight and a few vitals first." The nurse rattled off the words without thought or emotion, as she would any memorized instruction. Ellie always likened this little exchange to the one given by every airline attendant in the world and repeated it in her mind. In the unlikely event of a loss of air pressure. She followed the nurse to the exam room and took a seat after recording her weight, temperature, and blood pressure in her file. She sat in the uncomfortable chair and gazed around the stark room. This was the wait she hated most. At least in the waiting room, she had an exit at her disposal. This tiny room felt more like a holding cell. Dr. Chambers entered 10 minutes later. She was in her mid-50s, tall and slender. She moved with the grace of someone who had participated in some type of sports in her college years, perhaps basketball, Ellie thought, the gray in her hair now claiming the larger portion of color. Her expression confirmed Ellie's suspicion before she spoke. When Ellie exited the Medical Plaza building, the rain had reduced to a misting drizzle. Summer had run its course in the Wyoming town, and fall had settled in for its short performance before the freezing winter season arrived. The mist reminded her of Seattle, and she struggled for a moment to remember why she had left there. A mental stumble like that would have alarmed her a few months ago, but she had resigned herself to the reality of her medical condition and accepted it as her life now, what there was left of it. She walked the short distance to her car, a pristinely restored yellow 1961 Volkswagen Beetle, a going-away gift from her late father the day she left home for college in Seattle. She stood looking at the clouds rolling overhead and had the impression that the entire world was passing through some galactic car wash. She let the mist collect on her upturned face, puddling a bit in the wells of her eyes before escaping like tears down her cheek. Those would be the only tears she would shed, she thought. She drove the 15 miles home on autopilot, that state of mind when people drive miles before realizing they have paid no attention to the road or their driving, wondering how they have gone so far without a collision or running off the road. She had replayed the events of the past year in her head. Ellie eventually became accustomed to the idea that she had an uninvited growth in her head. A glioblastoma, they called it, a very aggressive type of brain cancer. She went about her busy life suffering through the standard post-surgery treatment plan, and all was well until a year later. Initially, her symptoms included sensory changes, sensation, vision, smell, hearing, and even taste. They varied in intensity, and she generally tolerated them well. However, a few months ago, when her cognitive abilities showed signs of deterioration, she found herself searching for words to complete simple sentences or thinking clearly at times. When Ellie brought them to the attention of Dr. Chambers, she became immediately concerned. Some symptoms are really destructive in the sense that people are wide awake and may look completely alert or normal, she had said, but they are very sick cognitively. Thus, sparking this new round of tests, a computed tomography or CT scan, and additional talk of ramped-up treatment plans would include more radiation therapy and chemotherapy. This all had proven academic, however. The latest scans had indicated that the only option at this point was surgery, And that only offered less than a 10% chance of any improvement. No possibility of total cancerous tissue removal or improvement in already affected areas, not the way Ellie had expected this day to go. If she was honest with herself, though, she had to admit that her move to this remote location and into the large, empty house was to prepare for just this scenario. It had been a hell of a last couple of years. Shortly after her move to attend Seattle University, her adoptive parents died because of a collision with a drunken driver. All were killed, including the other driver and his passenger. Knowing her life would never be the same without the anchor provided by her parents, she had retreated from it altogether. In a way, she felt this latest twist was the world's way of reclaiming the life she had abandoned, perhaps to pass it along to someone more worthy. 20 minutes later, she was still sitting in her car. The rain was lifting away to the west, and the evening light was falling down golden, bleeding mixtures of greens and blues through the trees. Now, the late afternoon threw a patchwork quilt of loneliness over the hills. Yes, this was her life. She had come here to surrender it back to the fates that sought to reclaim it. She was done, or rather, nothing was left to be done. Either way, the outcome would be the same. She turned off the engine and glanced back down the mile-long gravel path that served as the driveway to the old house. The house was the one thing wherein she still found comfort and peace. She loved that she could lose herself in the large building and find a new vista to gaze upon in each window, the brilliant buttery glow of the sunrise from her bedroom window to the upstairs study, where the azure sky fought daily against the changing to fiery red, then purple, and finally to black in the evenings. Despite what the world offered, she found an odd sense of peace here. She let the weight of the day's events hold her in the car seat for several minutes, staring past the big house at the already snow-peaked mountains of the Bighorn Range. She always found serenity in the mountain's permanence, a kind she could never know in this ephemeral world she currently occupied. A cloud passed over the mountains then, blocking out the last rays of violet as day passed the baton to evening darkness. The flickering of light from the window of the study on the upper level caught her gaze. She watched as the dim yellow light blinked on, then off again several times behind the lacy window curtain. She pondered the light for a moment. She had experienced several such events over the last couple of months. At first, she dismissed the events as typical symptoms of an aging house. Houses seemed to creak and moan as they age, just like people, and she attributed the open doors and lights left on or off to her advancing condition. In fact, the increasing number of occurrences had prompted her recent visit to Dr. Chambers, the results of which confirmed her suspicion that her brain was playing cruel tricks on her. She simply turned the knob and walked in when she reached the front door. No need to lock doors when you're that far removed from civilization, another perk of living in such an unpopulated area. The vast space between the county's inhabitants was a crucial factor in her decision to settle here. She let her purse and car keys fall to the coffee table with a solid thunk and walked to the large bay window facing the comforting mountain range, a barely visible soft gray outline, the only remaining evidence of the day. There was an audible click from the stairway behind her, and the reflection of the staircase to the upper level appeared in the window. She turned, looking over her shoulder to see the staircase and upper level still bathed in the growing darkness. No light shone from the upper floor. She wearily rubbed her eyes, not feeling the energy to face more of the tumor-induced tricks of her mind. She had become adept at ignoring these events, even though doing so still required some effort and willingness to let any anxiety born from them pass without unsettling her mind. She made her way into the kitchen and poured herself a comforting glass of red wine, taking a moment to let the liquid confront the uneasiness that wanted to grow within her. After a few moments, the feeling abated, and she walked back into the living room to collect her purse and keys before heading up to bed. Still sipping on the wine, she turned and stopped at the foot of the stairs. The table where she had deposited her keys and purse was empty. Nothing except the cream-colored lace doily occupied the surface. She held the glass steady at her lips, contemplating the empty tabletop. The light from the upper hallway at the top of the stairs behind her clicked to life. She turned to look up into the soft glow of the ornamental glass globe. She walked up the stairs, taking each one at a slow but steady and determined pace. She felt no fear, no apprehension, just a disoriented confusion, a pull toward the light that seemed to beckon her quietly. She reached the top of the stairs and stopped directly under the light switch to her right. She toggled the switch on and off, and then back on again. The light obediently responded. She turned her gaze to the end of the hallway. The door to the study was open, revealing the dark room where this current game of winking lights had begun. As she looked at the dark outline of the doorway, the light in the room blinked to life. "Am I seeing what I think I'm seeing?" she thought to herself, oddly devoid of any fear that one would expect from such a situation. "Or am I thinking I'm seeing something I'm not?" She walked to the doorway and pushed the door all the way open. The room was illuminated by the lamp atop the corner of the desk that sat in front of the window. It took her a moment to realize her keys and purse sat patiently atop the old leather desk pad. This particular event had taken on an air of realism that the others had lacked. Yet still, she felt no fear or anxiety, only a growing sense of curiosity that drew her toward the table. She stood there and looked carefully at the objects she had deposited downstairs, then around the room. Nothing seemed out of place or changed from the last time she had stood at this window admiring a sunrise. She looked out that same window now, seeing only her reflection and a few soft twinkling stars between invisible clouds. Still holding her wine glass, she placed her keys inside her purse, collected them from the desk, and pulled them tight against her body. She looked around the room once more before bending and clicking off the lamp on the desk. She had almost reached the doorway when the light clicked on again. However, just after the audible click of the lamp, she heard a voice call her name. "Elaine!" The voice was soft but clearly audible. It seemed to come from no clear direction but every corner of the room at once. There was also an unmistakable tone of loneliness in the sound. That same feeling of aloneness settled in her chest as the voice repeated her name, the tone still soft and pleading. "Elaine!" Ellie turned back towards the window. There, on top of the desk in the same space where her purse had sat only a moment ago, lay a book. She walked cautiously back to the desk and placed the purse and wine glass on the corner of the desk. The book's cover was a deep blue leather, cracked and lined with age. She put one hand on the cover, half expecting it to have no substance at all. Its solidity surprised her. Her courage growing, she opened the book. As the aged leather stretched, it made a slight, dry, squeaking sound. It appeared to be a journal of some sort. She confirmed this suspicion when she turned to the second page. There was writing near the middle of the page. It was a confident and cursive handwritten title. "Kaleb Eugene Edwards, my diary, after my death."